ॐ वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम्. So we'll continue from where we left. It has been a while since we last discussed uh, Bhagavad Gita because I had to go to Netherlands for a program. So we missed a few Saturdays. But anyway, just to recapitulate, we were discussing the path of Bhakti Yoga, where we were discussing verse 8, where Sri Krishna tells Arjuna the essence of Bhakti Yoga. So we saw what he said last time, we discussed it elaborately. So I'll just recapitulate what we discussed very, very briefly. So he said, after giving many options, after first describing to Arjuna that the path of knowledge seems to be very attractive because you don't need a personal God. You don't need an idea of personal God whom to worship. Many people uh, who are rational, they would prefer the path of jnana because Jnana Yoga seems to be impersonal and they find it is very easy to, or not easy, or rather, you don't have to start with a belief in a personal God whom you have not seen. There might be stories associated with the God whom we are worshipping. He may be Rama, he may be Krishna, but the historicity and sometimes the importance of human being or an avatara as an ideal is very difficult for rational people to accept. That is why in Hinduism we have the other option, the path of jnana, where you don't even need to believe that the existence of a personal God, though God has been described as Satchidananda Brahman. There are many ways of describing God, which Buddhism even does away with. Buddhism does not even insist that you have to believe in any kind of God, personal or impersonal. They just come to the root cause of the problem, that is the human mind, human thoughts, because of which we are facing issues and there is suffering. So you have to remove suffering. Buddha has shown a very scientific, rational path which will lead to nirvana if we believe in that path. So, and he is telling it from his own experience. But so also Krishna and all the other prophets of different religion, they also claim to have that their teachings are based on their experience. So whatever is based on experience, whatever is true for them and has been true for many people, many of their followers, obviously an intelligent person will not just say that they may be wrong or where is the historicity. If you ask for proof for everything, then you'll end up nowhere. You have to have something as a starting point. So, Sri Krishna now, knowing fully well that most of the people are inclined towards worshipping God with form, Avyakta, he very clearly said that it may be Avyakta, the worshipping the unmanifest or the formless, and worshipping the manifest. Ultimately, if they lead to the same goal, then why are you insisting on teaching me this science of bhakti? Why this 12th chapter at all? So then Sri Krishna, anticipating all such questions, tells Arjuna that for most of the people, especially for one who is embodied, the embodied soul finds it difficult to imagine anything without a body. Because if you meditate on a formless God, then you have to believe or you have to experience, have a little experience of that bodilessness. Because if you have a body, then the greatest truth that you want to attain, a good starting point would be that that reality also has a body. So I quoted Swami Vivekananda who said, suppose imagine It is not possible, but imagine if a cow wants to worship God. What will the cow have as a concept? I mean, if he wants to worship a personal God, it will be a big cow, a superior cow. So, similarly, human beings would imagine that their personal God is intensely human. So, let us not come discuss that, go into that discussion, which I have already discussed, the concept of avatara. But Sri Krishna says, even otherwise, the for people who are attached to their body, for people who are not attached to their body, who are born, who are very rare, but there are some lucky ones, like Totapuri, Sri Ramakrishna's guru. He was trained in the idea of bodilessness right from the age of 6 when he joined the monastery. So they had to subject their bodies, subject, uh, practice such a discipline that the body became secondary for them. That is how difficult the Advaitic sadhana is. That you imagine that any heat and pain, pleasure and pain, heat and cold, all those opposites should not cause a ripple in your mind. Whatever happens to the body, you have to endure it. So that endurance is taught in very difficult ways. In the sense, the Totapuri's monastery, which was in Haryana, that monastery, they had strict rules that they will not stay under a roof any time in their life. They were always to stay in the open, even in the monastery. Though it is named, there was a monastery for cooking and other things, but stay would be outside. They would have their own uh, place to sleep under the tree. That's the only luxury that they could afford. And they would move like that, and they were not asked to stay in one place because they have to be used to all extremes: heat, cold, good people, bad people. You just have to ignore. Such difficult is their sadhana. So if that bodilessness has been attained because of a stern discipline or a strict discipline right from for many years, Totapuri himself says after 40 years he had the realization of Brahman. So Sri Krishna, knowing fully well that Arjuna is not fit for this kind of sadhana, he says for an embodied person, it is better to follow a personal God. The path of bhakti is much better. You worship the Vyakta, not the Avyakta. And then finally, through different verses, he comes to the verse number 8, which we discussed last time. And he says how to do it. मय्येव मन आधत्स्व मयि बुद्धिं निवेशय निवशिष्यसि मय्येव अथ ऊर्ध्वं न संशय. Fix your mind on me alone. Me as in, here is referring to the personal God, the God whom you consider to be your Ishta Devata. So fix your mind, that is the first condition, on me alone. Let your thoughts dwell in me. Even if they wander, they will be, they should wander. Maybe they could be allowed to wander provided they somehow connect to their Lord whom they are worshipping. For example, if somebody is meditating on Krishna, so Krishna's different leelas, his childhood leela, that is why it is very important to somehow direct the thought towards the goal, that is the Ishta Devata. So if you are able to fix your mind on the form, well and good. But if you can't, if the mind wanders, then let it wander in the exploits of Sri Krishna. There are so many exploits. That is why our scriptures are full of stories. You may consider them as myths, but still they have a wonderful value because that reminds you of Krishna all the time. So the different exploits of Krishna, as described in the Bhagavatam and many other uh, places, you will find a lot of exploits of Sri Krishna, his life, his childhood, his uh, younger days, when he leaves Vrindavan, he goes to Dwarka, the kingmaker Sri Krishna, and then the battlefield. There are so many things to meditate upon when the mind wanders. So let your thoughts also dwell on me. If you cannot fix your mind on me, let your thoughts dwell in me. You will hereafter live in me alone, means you will live in that impersonal consciousness alone. Of there is no doubt. So that is how he explains. So now, anticipating the verse ninth will show us, what if you can't do that? What if there are so many other pursuits in life which engage, which obviously engage Arjuna's mind? He had so many issues to deal with that he could not afford to meditate on his Ishta throughout the day, keeping his mind fixed. It may be possible for a yogi. So, knowing fully well it is impossible for a majority of the people, Sri Krishna says, so, as if anticipating what the sadhaka has to do, what has that sadhaka to do, whose mind is not staunch and steady in the pursuit of God. He doesn't have the time to do it, or maybe he is so busy with his day-to-day duties that he is not unable to fix his mind on God. Then he says, Atha chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mahi sthiram. If you are not able to concentrate, Atha chittam, chittam means mind. If you are not unable to fix your mind steadily, just fixing the mind now and then is not the problem. The problem here is you have to be steady in your meditation. If you are unable to fix your mind steadily on me, atha chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mai sthiram. Sthiram means steadily. Abhyasa yogena tato mamit chaptum dhananjaya. So you try to reach me by Abhyasa Yoga. We also discussed a little of this with Sri Ramakrishna's example, that how constant practice, uh, Abhyasa Yoga means you try to repeat the name of the Lord or try to fix the mind will wander, then again try to fix the mind. So it's a constant effort to not to uh, fix the mind on God 100%, but whenever it wanders, take it back to the Lord. So, if one's nature is restlessness, it can be nurtured in such a way. As I said, there is a theory that human being is half nature and half nurture. By nature, I mean he is born with a baggage of samskaras and tendencies of the past several lives. Is the accumulated tendencies of so many lives he is born with, his baggage of tendencies, karma, samskaras. That is nature. So he may be born with a particular nature, but our karma theory also promises or gives hope to a person, saying that 50% can be nurtured. I mean, you still have time and also the scope to reverse those tendencies. So the accumulated karmas can be slowly uh, changed, and you can change your nature by nurture. So the most effect that is the most effective means, and that is exactly what Abhyasa Yoga is. So in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras also you will find this, that Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, they say that by Abhyasa alone, in fact, they give a lot of importance to Abhyasa. They don't even, though they don't believe in a personal God, that's not a necessary condition, though they say Ishvara. Whatever that Ishvara means, Patanjali does not define that Ishvara should be an avatara, or it can be a symbol, or it can be a holy person. Anything that makes your mind steady. That's the idea. And Abhyasa also is in Kriya Yoga. They also emphasize this Abhyasa. But Sri Krishna gives a wonderful example which we discussed. I'll just, uh, he used to explain things so easily. The verse of Gita could be understood much more easily if we see this particular example of Sri Krishna. He said there was a man who goes to a learned visitor. I mean, he was a spiritual person. He goes to his friend who had a dog. And he goes, and that dog was, obviously, most of the dogs are pampered. Because if he's a pet, then you want the dog to be always listening to you, and then you give the dog a little freedom. And because he was a pet, he was jumping on his lap now and then whenever they were discussing something seriously. And he had absolutely no control over this dog. And every time they were discussing something important, this dog used to come and sit in his lap and do all sorts of things. And naturally, the visitor was irritated. Said, "What kind of training you have given to this dog?" So he said, "See, every time I'll teach you a technique. Every time he jumps on your lap, give it a nice slap on the face. And then, but still, the dog was unable because it was habituated to jump on his, and he was spoilt, so to say, by his master. So it took a lot of time. But then, even the dogs who was restless and had such bad habits was not was not slow to understand. It quickly learned that my master now, every time I jump, he gives me a smack on the face. So I should rather think before jumping. So slowly, the jumping of the dog reduced, and finally, uh, the dog was under control. So through this example, Sri Ramakrishna says what the visitor was conveying to the master is, this mind is also like this dog, a restless dog. Every time the mind does not obey you and you run after what the mind tells you to do, it's your thoughts that control you. That is the essential teaching of Buddha also. That don't let thoughts to control you. You try to control your thoughts. You tell the mind this is what you have to think now. So if you're sitting for meditation, you have to think of meditation. If you're sitting thinking of Krishna, you have to think of Krishna alone. Every time it thinks of something else, you bring it back slowly, like slapping that dog, and then make it think, make it think of the object, the goal alone. So this repeated blows in Patanjali's yoga is known as Pratipaksha Bhavana. Pratipaksha Bhavana means exactly cultivate the opposite thought, and thus you uh, reduce your samskaras. So as I said, we have come with 50% of our uh, nature, or not 50%, almost a proportion which is quite near 50%. So a person is half nature and half nurture. So he has come with some gunas of accumulated tendencies of so many past lives. So you can't expect everybody to be equal. Everybody comes with a certain amount of restlessness in his mind. So you can't say it is the parents who have spoiled him. No, even if the parents had given him or her the best kind of training, if the nature, if the accumulated karma or the accumulated samskaras that he has been born with, where you will make him restless, then he will become restless no matter how much the parents try. But the training of parents or training, his own abhyasa can reduce the intensity and slowly counter all these thoughts. And finally, we can hope that at some stage of life, he would have had control over his own nature. Nature as in nature of the mind. So now this is one way, Abhyasa Yoga. But Sri Krishna knows that even this Abhyasa Yoga requires a lot of patience. Otherwise, everybody would have done yoga, followed Patanjali's method, and everybody starts with the determination that I will, whenever any thought comes, I will give it a nice blow, try to counter it with a positive thought. That is exactly what science of japa does. The japa is just repeated, even without faith. If a person repeats, at least it can counter old habits. But if it is done with faith, the nurture will be faster and you can change your nature. So, but if a person is unable to do it, he's talking of Arjuna who is now on a battlefield. There is no time to sit and do meditation or japa. So, is his situation hopeless? I mean, you can't expect a Kshatriya who has now gathered a huge army on the battlefield to sit in a corner and meditate. Maybe as the rules were in those days, there was a rule that after sunset there would be no war. But then they would be so tired that there is hardly any chance that any of them would go and meditate in a corner. But knowing fully well his intensely restless mind, because of which he was Rajasic, and because of which they had all, in fact, all the Kshatriyas had gathered to fight a battle. Of course, there were Satvika people among them. There were quite a few who were forced into this battle. So, but assuming that majority of the people who come to spiritual life have a restless mind, Sri Krishna anticipating that not only in Arjuna but in other people, he says, is there any other course open to a sadhaka if even this Abhyasa yoga is not possible? If they can't sit quietly. It is very difficult to sit quiet, though it may be very easy for some lazy people just to sit quiet and do nothing. But for a person who is really active, to make him sit quiet is the most difficult thing in life. They will just be restless. You can't force it. It will be a very big punishment to tell somebody who is very active to sit quietly and meditate. So, for such a person, is there no way out? No, he says there is. So, abhyase api asamarthosi mat karma mat paramo bhava madartam api karmani kurvan siddhim avapsasi. So, if you are even unable, abhyase api asamartha, if you are not even capable of doing this simple thing. We know in Girish Ghosh's life, this incident is there, but at least he was very honest. He was asked, he obviously had gone to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna said, okay, can you repeat the name of the Lord in the morning and the evening at fixed times? He said, no, no, there's no fixed time in my life. He was at least honest, very honest, because he used to drink a lot and so many things were astray. He was a totally broken person with lot of bad habits. So he said, I can't do that. I don't even know. Then he said, okay, at least before going to sleep, can you take the name of the Lord? I will give you a mantra. He said, see, to be very honest, I do not even know. Suppose I'm too drunk, which was normally the case with him. He used to drink a lot. So after that, he says, sometimes I go to sleep in an unconscious state. I mean, I'm not even aware that I have gone to sleep. So how can I promise you? It will be untruth if I tell you that I will repeat the name at least before going to sleep. Then said, as soon as you get up, can you do that? He says, even that is not possible because I do not know in what state I get up. Then, of course, Sri Ramakrishna had to uh, take recourse to the last thing. He said, then surrender everything to me. Give me the power of attorney. In law, if the lawyer has to do everything on behalf of the client, he has to give the power of attorney to somebody or even to the lawyer. So, something similar to that. He said, you do, but then it will be once you give the power of attorney to someone, then he will take all the decisions on your behalf. Girish Ghosh did not realize that he thought, oh, such a nice thing. He doesn't even expect me to do japa even once. So if I give the power of attorney, I am free. But he didn't realize that giving the choice making task of one's own life to somebody else is still more difficult. He didn't, for a person who was so, uh, I mean, so strong or so restless and who always believed things will go his way. That's the result. Nobody liked him, though he was a great artist, a great playwright. He wrote so many dramas. But because of his bad habits, he made a lot of enemies. But to give up the ego, he thought not doing anything is the easiest thing in life. Sri Ramakrishna will do everything for my sake. He said, definitely I'll give the power of attorney. But then later in life, he said, see what a foolish decision I made. I should have at least agreed to do something myself. That was much more easier than giving my power of attorney because here now it seems when his child died, he was crying. He was practically in tears. He loved that child very much. So even then, Sri Ramakrishna, came in a vision, obviously, and gave him told him, see, you have given the power of attorney, you can't weep like this. So even he could not weep when his own child died. So he later on said, this decision of mine to give the power of attorney to Sri Ramakrishna appeared to be very easy and the easiest thing, and he's so gracious that he has taken charge of my whole life. So I don't have to do anything. But it is very difficult not to do anything. That is the point. Because not to do anything or maybe surrender one's will to the Lord is the ultimate stage in life. It doesn't come so easily. Krishna knows this. Even if he tries to convince both the Kauravas and Pandavas, he tried his best not to convince them not to fight this war. But they were Rajasic. Both of them were Rajasic. Both of them had a point to score, and they had come prepared for the battle. For such a restless person, if you tell them you forget everything, uh, follow the path of peace and go and meditate, because that is the goal of life. Though he agreed, this is 12th chapter. In 11 chapters, he is trying his best to tell what the goal of life is, and another 6 chapters will be there. At the end of 18 chapters, seeing that he has given almost everything that can be told to a spiritual aspirant, still he knows that ultimately Arjuna is going to do what he feels is good for him. So he says, I have told you everything. I don't insist on a particular path. I told you what is good, what is bad. Now you have to choose. Yatha ichchasi tatha kuru. Whatever you feel now from all these things which I have told you, so many options, so many options I have given you. You follow whichever path you think is good for you. So he didn't impose his will on Arjuna. That's why he says, even if you are unable to practice Abhyas Yoga, which in my mind is the second best. The best is to totally be immersed in the Lord in meditation, and also do always think of Him. Place your whole mind on Him, on the Lord or the goal of life. But if you can't do that, at least do Abhyasa Yoga. For majority of the day, your mind will be wandering, but now and then try to gather it, like giving a slap to that dog, and try to control your mind just as you would control the dog. But if you can't even do that, he knew that Arjuna was not in a position to do this. Then he says the next best option is to do all actions, whatever you are doing now, for my sake. Don't do it for your sake. In the sense, there is a fruit which you are expecting from this war. Anyway, you have assembled here for the war, but don't think of the consequences, don't think of the result. So if you are not able to practice Abhyas Yoga, you are, by your very nature, you will be doing a lot of karma in the 24 hours and 365 days and the years that you live. So since you have to act, you cannot do all what I told you in the previous verses, but your whole life will be only actions, 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 which you have started with certain motives. If you try to remove the motives and do as if you are doing the actions for the Lord, even by performing actions for my sake, you will attain perfection. So, the idea is Sri Krishna understood that the force of habit is so bad that if you ask a person who is habituated to work, that's why many people after retirement find it very difficult. They will search for something or the other. Most of these care homes and all, they will have a lot of, it is so difficult to engage old people. Otherwise, they'll feel neglected. If you ask a old person, you don't have to earn anything, whatever little money you have, and I will add something. The son says, you just sit in a corner, read some books, meditate. You ask how difficult it, he will ask for some activity. If he had been not trained in yoga, then silence and keeping quiet would be a punishment for that old man or old woman. So it is a force of habit which Sri Krishna knew, which will make Arjuna act, not be able to do Abhyasa Yoga, even doing work for uh, at least since he has to work for my sake. Now, how to do that? So sometimes your tendencies which are apparently bad. Now, I remember Swami Premeshanandji had this habit because he was a teacher, he used to talk a lot. Then, when he came across this verse, it is said that he found that Sri Krishna is telling me to direct whatever I have to him. Now, such a bent of habit, because it is a habit which unfortunately teachers have to talk. You can't expect a teacher who is silent. He or she has to talk. So, if that bent of mind or that tendency, that habit, which is dragging you towards an unknown destination, is made to focus on the Lord, even then, slowly that habit becomes an advantage. So he says, a talkative man, for example, that is what uh, Premishanji says. Somebody asked him, uh, don't you get tired talking all the whole day? He said, see, I was a teacher. And in fact, many of his students became monks even before he became. He used to talk to them so much that they would, many of them became monks. Much before he himself renounced the world and became a monk, much Swami Premeshananda was his name. So he says, you see, by my profession, because of my profession, or maybe because of my nature, I have been talking almost several hours every day. There is no other way. So now, if I become a monk, having followed the profession of a teacher, I have to talk. I have to talk because nature will force me to talk. Then I decide that we can talk on God instead of worldly things. If a majority of my talk is on God, then it will be to my advantage. So that is the reason. So an active man, Sri Krishna says, if you are active by default, by your very nature will make you work. In fact, in the third and fourth chapter, he told Arjuna, some guest has come. You see, he has gone. So, a talkative man or a man of action. I'm just giving an example of Swami Premeshananji. But suppose in his place there was somebody who wants to do a lot of work. He is very highly restless. So he can work for the Lord. He can engage himself in some activity which will make him feel that he's working for God. You see many of our centers, in many of our centers in India, especially not here, but where it is so difficult to engage the volunteers. You know, there are hundreds of people who come, and then the activities all are also there. So there is a department to allot work to volunteers. We faced this problem. We had, apart from some 35 staff members, we had at least 60, 70 volunteers on whom so many, like there was medical activity, there was value education activity. So obviously we can't conduct all these activities by paying salary. So that was not our option. So we saw that there are a lot of people who can volunteer and who can also uh, try to direct their activity oriented life. They are habitually active. If you ask them to come and meditate in the shrine, perhaps they will come for 1 or 2 days and then stop coming because that their nature does not allow. So they will have to be given some activity. And that way, this verse says that if you cannot do Abhyasa Yoga, if you cannot even do the basic minimum that is required, at least do work. Gradually, your mind will be purified and Godhood will be, you will make yourself fit for a spiritual life. So, Sri Krishna in the Gospel says, all a man has to do. He is referring to this particular verse, but of course, that was not the context. Somebody must have told him that my mind is restless, I cannot meditate. So, when a man changes his attitude, he is freed from bondage. That is what Sri Krishna says. What does it mean? He does the same work, but he just changes the attitude. Earlier, he used to do with some motive or motiveless, maybe he was forced to do work or forced to do work because his profession demanded it. But if he just changes this attitude, doing the same work, he can change his whole life. He can change, if he changes his attitude, he can slowly get rid of bondage. He can be free. Whatever work takes place through a man or a sadhaka, he has to think that it is actually the work of the Lord, whether it is in his own profession or whether he is working as a volunteer in a religious place. So, if you have that attitude that, oh Lord, when this is what Sri Krishna is telling, that this work has to be done by me. Now, anyway, I have to do it. So, if I do it and dedicate the fruits to you, then he says that is the next best you can do, because that will prepare the mind for a mind of for a practice of abhyasa yoga, and then it will release one person from bondage. But then there is another category. Sri Krishna does not even stop here. He says there are even people who do not want to do it for the Lord. They're extremely, earlier they used to do in a very, very selfish way. And they were not afraid to accept that this is my profession, I'm earning money. And most of the people come in that category. Though they may think that they are unselfish, they are selfish. They have some interest, hidden interest. Even for them, there is some hope. But there are men who work only for themselves. They are not able to feel, leave alone every time they work, but even intermittently also they are not able to feel that the work that they are doing is the Lord's work. Somehow the ego comes in and they think that it is my work, that it is I who am doing this work, and people should be grateful for that. Even for such a person, Sri Krishna asks, is there no way out? Suppose you come to the last category where he is motivated by work, he wants to do everything with an intensely selfish purpose. Is there any way he can practice that detachment? He says, Athaita athay etat api ashaktosi kartum madhyogam ashritaha. If you are not even able to do it, madhyoga means you taking refuge in me. Madhyoga means doing it for my sake. If you are not able to do any work for my sake, even in that condition, do it, abandon the fruits of all action with the self subdued. Just calm down your mind and do your work. Forget dedicating the work to any god. You don't believe in a god, okay. But at least the selfish work you are doing, don't be doing it with a passion and agitation. Do it in a calm way. No doubt you know that after the work is over, I'll get fruits for that. He says, doesn't matter. Try to abandon the fruits, but that will happen only when you do it in a calm way. If somebody is motivated, always thinking of some result in the future, the anxiety, the desire to reach that goal, even before that is prematurely, before he really gets the benefit, that will actually tax the brain. It will not allow him to subdue the self and do the work. In this way, even the work the quality of the work will suffer. And he will suffer, even if for his own selfish interest, he will suffer. So Sri Ramakrishna says that many people have selfishness so deep rooted in them that they are incapable of getting out of it. Then what is the way out? So Sri Krishna says, an earthbound man, a man in bondage, if you tell him that you do work for me, he'll say, why should I do work for you? I don't believe in you. There are atheists who say, no, I will earn the fruits of my own labor. So he wants to gather more and more fruits. Then Sri Krishna says, even for such a person, you can convince him and says that you will earn more, or maybe you will uh, find your life much more comfortable or much more easy. Now you are doing work which ought to expend less energy, but you are expending more energy because you are infatuated, and or maybe you are full of passion and anger when things are not done. So you just start pushing through everyone and then trying to get your work done. So more profit will come to you if you just calm down your mind. So the idea is, even if he doesn't listen or dedicate his work to the Lord, even if he does his work with a self-subdued, that is what the word used here. He says, Sarva karma phalak tyagam tata kuru yata atmavan. Atmavan means one who is self-controlled. So if your self is controlled, even to produce a good result, to produce good fruits of your action, uh, you have to subdue yourself. You have to subdue your selfishness, at least to the extent that you just don't burden your mind by constantly thinking of the result. For example, you are preparing for an exam, and then you half of the time you just go daydreaming that suppose I don't pass this exam, or suppose this does not happen, suppose I don't get this. Then actually you are spoiling the work that you are doing, the knowledge that you are acquiring. So abandoning the fruits of all action means not that you give up the fruits. If you subdue the self, you will understand that the person who does that, he at least uh, goes to the next stage where he can dedicate the fruits to the Lord, because his quality of his work will be that. So then all the hindrances, all the troubles that prevent him from doing Abhyasa Yoga will be removed if he is given uh, a hope, or if he is told that even for succeeding in your life, in whatever selfish goal you have kept for yourself, if you are not subdued, if you are not calm, that's why many of the good teachers and good parents tell their children not to get agitated just before the exam. They said just go with a calm mind. Why do they say that? Said whatever you have to prepare, you have prepared till now. There's no way that you are going to increase in knowledge. The time will not permit. So whatever you know, if you are going to appear for the exam, if worry takes away a little bit of your energy, then it's not going to help. Whatever you have studied, that also will most likely forget. So whatever you have done now, just forget. This is the end. That is what exactly he's saying, that Abhyasa Yoga would have been much better, but if you can't do it, can't dedicate the fruit to, to God, because you don't have faith in a personal God or any sort of divine. We don't have any concept, and you are purely doing it with a certain worldly goal or a selfish goal in mind. That to outgrow that selfishness, he has to first subdue his mind. So that much at least he has to do. The earthbound, the man who is very keen to get the fruits of his actions, he wants more and more fruits. So maybe sometimes one has to tell him, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to sometimes promise somebody, some of the ruffians and the people, he was so confident in his repetition of the name of the Lord will save this person, that he will promise him worldly benefits, because they will understand only that. So he said, why should I repeat the name of God? Oh, if you repeat the name of God, these things will come to you. Tempted by that, he knew that somehow if I convince them by dangling a carrot, which will make them do the good thing or the right thing, even then they will be saved. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna uh, is telling him. Some people, some customs, like some communities like Jains and all, they have their own way of making people less selfish. They say 10% of your income on a particular day, you donate to some good cause. Now they do it not because they don't want, they are definitely keen to earn more and more money every year, but at least the motive is there, at least 10% let me give. So you abandon the fruits of a little of your action. So to tempt them to follow a unselfish life, their selfishness has to be regulated. That is what Sri Krishna is doing. And many of the customs that you find in different religions, which say that a portion of your saving should be given to God. People do it out of fear that if we don't do it, then maybe our business will uh, not succeed. So even if it is done out of fear or done out of any selfish motive, even then the Lord says it is good because the ordinary man has to gradually overcome his selfishness by these actions. Since then Sri Ramakrishna tells in his gospel that no matter what you do in spiritual life, you cannot remain without doing work. Whether you do a highly busy professional job or any other job, you have to do some work. Your inborn nature forces you to work, whether you get remuneration for that or not. You can't just ask a person not to do work, he will do work. Therefore, he says, let your activities be carried out well. Do it in a very calm way, whether you believe in God. But if it is done without attachment, if you do it in a very calm way, without unnecessarily bothering your head about the consequences and straining yourself and with lot of attachment, fears, anxieties, worries, if you just drop those, that is what he's saying, it will take you Godward, even though you may not believe in God. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, be not affected by the pleasure and pain ensuing from your activities. Because every activity, the person who very often you will see, the person who works hard to earn money never enjoys his own money. It is his descendants or somebody else will squander that wealth because has no time to even spend his own money because he feels if I spend, then who will earn? So that is how Sri Ramakrishna used to say the miser always thinks of how he could save, but what is the purpose of saving the money? Even for his own selfish interest, uh, he should not be too anxious about whatever he does. Do it with a spirit, do it with a subdued mind, which is again we come back to that same point, which will be discussed in the next verse, verse number 12, where all these different karma, jnana, everything will be compared. So he says, if possible, Sri Ramakrishna knows that everybody will not do it. Associate all your work with Ishvara and see how he handles all your problems, all the tension, all the anxiety. Because I'm doing it for him. If it is good, it is. I mean, not that I'll do bad with uh, uh, any specific intention. I'll try to do my best. But if I dedicate it to the Lord, then it is His problem how He will handle that. So you have to prepare yourself, Sri Ramakrishna says, for union with Him. That is the verse that we discussed, the seventh verse, which was the of highest verse, which explained what Bhakti Yoga is. But then seventh, eighth, ninth, and he actually dilutes the message deliberately because he knows that people will not be able to do everything with the spirit of intense bhakti. Then, then the question may come now, Arjuna, among all these people who have been doing, or till now, you have given me a lot of advice. In Karma Yoga, you said Karma Yoga is good. In Jnana Yoga, second chapter, you said Jnana Yoga is good. Now, Sri Krishna is now trying to evaluate or sensing that now Arjuna is in a stage where he is getting a bit confused. So, what exactly should I do? Jnana, Bhakti, or if I'm not capable, should I go on doing my karma? Or the last one, where you, even with a lot of selfishness, you do it with a subdued mind. So, what are the indications of my spiritual progress? Can I try to find out? What are the natural ways? And is it a graded sadhana that I have to do? Then Sri Krishna says, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat, jnanat dhyanam vishishyate, dhyanat karma phala tyagah, tyagat shanti ranantaram. So this is a very important verse. So better than knowledge. So this is something which is very difficult to understand for people who think knowledge is the highest path. But here he is not talking of that knowledge. He is talking of abhyasa. So better indeed is knowledge. Uh, Knowledge in the sense, knowledge of what you are doing, than mere abhyasa. That means abhyasa means practicing, doing any spiritual practice. Say you are doing nama japa. Abhyasa is good. It will help you to control the mind. But better than abhyasa, than formal abhyasa is jnana. Knowingly doing that abhyasa, that this repetition of the holy name is going to do me this. If you have the knowledge of that, then it is better than just doing it mechanically. Though it is useful, he doesn't say better, he says. It's not that it is waste. Better indeed is knowledge than formal abhyasa. Better than knowledge is meditation. Means better than intellectual understanding of what you are doing is actually doing it. Meditation means Shravana is listening, which can be compared with Abhyasa. Manana means thinking on what you heard, trying to understand. But then you should not spend the whole life on trying to understand. Very quickly, Shankaracharya says, Nididhyasana. Vedanta says, once you have understood, then don't bother reading more and more things to trying to understand. Then there will be no end to this understanding. That is why he says, Jnanat dhyanam vishishyate. So once you have, first is abhyasa, do abhyasa, then suddenly the knowledge will splash in your mind. You will understand what I am doing actually. It may come out of intuition because there is inherent power in the name of the Lord. So, jnanat dhyanam vishishyate, dhyanat karma, but he says, even greater than meditation, there is one thing. Dhyanat karma phala tyagah, renunciation of the fruit of actions. Tyagat Shanti Anantaram. Now, better indeed is knowledge than formal abhyasa. Better than knowledge is meditation. Better than meditation is renunciation of the fruit of action. Because the reason he gives why renunciation of the fruit of action is that peace immediately follows. As a result of intense knowledge or intense argument and intense analysis, listening to so many talks, you will get knowledge, but that will not give you peace till you renounce the fruit of actions. Because he says renunciation of any kind of renunciation gives immediate peace. And there is a beautiful example. I'll conclude with this because we have only 5 minutes. Uh, there is an example. That's why I said to understand Gita or any other scripture, when you compare it with the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, it becomes very easy to understand. So this verse, how can better than Abhyasa is Jnana, better than Jnana is Dhyana, and better than Dhyana is Karma Phala Tyaga. How Sri Ramakrishna is giving a beautiful example. How immediate peace comes to a person. He says a kite was there. So that kite, kites can see if there is some flesh or some meat in a butcher shop, some piece of meat was there. So it just swooped down and took that piece of meat and started flying back in the sky and was just sitting on a branch to eat that meat. piece of meat. Immediately, other kites saw. They all scrambled and tried to attack and get a piece of that. Then that poor kite who had actually uh, taken that meat in its mouth did not even get time to eat. So it wanted to protect that what it had uh, caught or what it had stolen from that shop. So it started running. You thought, if I go to another tree, these people, I can escape and then uh, in great peace I can eat. So he goes there, the other birds, and then more birds joined. So there was a huge flock of birds, kites, everybody fighting for that piece of meat. So the kite flew from tree to tree. It was so full of tension because they were all following. And then it thought now then the bigger vultures and the bigger birds came, kites came, and then they tried to even harm it. So to avoid all botheration, protect himself, he was forced to let go of that meat. And when he did that, he found, to his great relief, that all the birds, the meat fell down and some other bird pecked it and it started running or flying. And the birds leaving him, they started chasing him. Then the bird realized, Sri Ramakrishna says, he realized that all the time it was this piece of meat that was the cause of all trouble. Because I wanted to hold on to things. The more you hold on to things, people will be after you. That when will you let go of all these things? But the moment you give up the fruits of actions, tranquility is born because there's nobody to disturb you. So the moment this kite learned, there is in fact this story is there taken from the Bhagavatam, where there are 24 gurus of an Avaduta. An Avaduta, he set out. His guru had given him the mantra, but he was asked to just have his own experience of life. So he says, I learned 24 lessons, 24 gurus of the Advaita, of the Avaduta. That's a beautiful story in Bhagavata, where one of the stories is this. He just saw this and then he realized, see, if I give up the fruits of action, I will be at peace. Because tranquility immediately follows renunciation. You don't have to do jnana, dhyana, everything. The moment you give up the fruits of action, peace follows. Now, again, the question is, among all best is the last one, giving up the fruits of action. But who is dear to the Lord? Because this is Bhakti Yoga. Who among all the devotees, some of whom follow the path of jnana, some of them follow the path of karma, dedicating their work, they think they will serve the Lord by giving gifts, by doing some seva. Among them, among all of these categories, the different ways of serving the Lord, who is the favorite of the Lord? Now, Sri Krishna can obviously tell who is the favorite. So, uh, but before that, he, in a series of verse number 13 to 20, which we will not discuss now, time is over, he will give all the divine traits of that bhakta. And then he will say, a person who has these divine traits, some of these divine traits, not all. From 13 to 20, he will say, if you want to know who is my who is my favorite devotee, then the devotee's divine traits have to be described. And then he tells Arjuna at the end that whoever has a majority of these qualities from verse 13 to 20. So there are 7 verses, and we will focus on those 7 verses in our next, alternate Saturday class. Okay. Any questions? Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
No question. No.
Hmm?
No question.
There is?
No question.
Okay.
Shall I close?
Shall we?
Close?
Yeah. If
Can you wait 2 minutes?
just 2 minutes, you can wait. Come close. Huh?
I have a question.
No, ask.
No, you said that even the desire to know something itself can be like you want, because you know something, then the fruits of the results, it's not, you have to leave that aside, move on. So then how for example, in Japan and the bija for initiated people, the bija has a meaning, and when you know that meaning, and then it's to lead to something, then there is every time you repeat,
You have the knowledge of
you
that.
have that knowledge, so you are kind of expecting that eventually that will happen. So in a way, it is
No.
also a fruit, that you
Yeah,
are
yeah.
expecting.
So you should not expect. No. The
So
thing
then
is,
why even bother to know it then, or if
No.
because if you didn't know
No.
and
It,
it was
it's
just a
no.
repetition,
Knowing is not
it's
for.
better.
Knowing is just once. If you know, then you don't have to keep on reminding yourself that, like, for example, if you know that if I get good marks, the question is if knowing, how can we know? And after knowing, say we are doing japa, this is the question that is asked, that while doing japa, if we know the techniques of japa and what are the constituents of japa, how it works, that is also a kind of knowledge which will enable you to do japa or your mantra sadhana with faith. So when you do something with faith, you don't have to think. Once you know the meaning, then you go ahead with the japa. Then you don't have to always think this is the meaning, this is the meaning. No. Once you know the meaning, once you know that when you add, say, some two things, you will get this product. Then you just don't, every time you do, you don't think, you just put it. You know, once you have to know how to cook that particular recipe. But once you know, then you don't every time see the recipe book. It is something like that. So this knowledge is not to be, this knowledge is once for all. It is like Sri Ramakrishna used to give an example that if a room is dark, you don't have to, once you light, the darkness of hundreds of years will go away. Then there is light, you see everything very clearly. Then you don't have to take another torch and see it because it's already lighted. When the sun comes, you don't need a torch. And when it is dark, you need, but once the sun comes, you don't. So it is just like the meaning of the japa is the knowledge of the japa. It is as opposed to abhyasa. That's why Sri Krishna says abhyasa is good because you are constantly practicing it. But if you know why you are practicing it, it is still better. But if you meditate after abhyasa, you doing japa, you meditate also. That is still better. But best is giving up the fruits of action. That's why at the end of the sadhana, any sadhana you see, at least in the Ramakrishna mission, you are asked to give up the fruits of that action to the Lord. You don't keep it for yourself. You do whatever you can 1,000 times, 1,000, 2,000. And then finally, the important step is you offer it because that will give you peace. You have done it.
Like the kite.
Like the kite, yes. Can remember that because Sri Ramakrishna used to say that the thing is even japa can be done with a selfish purpose, but Sri Krishna does not criticize anyone. People start doing japa with selfish purposes because there are so many desires in their mind. And there's nothing wrong. He says it's nothing wrong. Suppose you have a toothache and then you know that nobody is helping you, no dentist is able to do, then you have to take the name of the Lord. Nothing wrong. But that's not the goal. The japa, the removing of toothache is not the goal, but it is a step on the way. Then you understand that that is not actually what japa is for. It is to give peace. That's why they say more than meditation, uh, uh, giving up the karma phala tyaga. So offering of the fruits of japa is the biggest step in our sadhana. It follows this Gita argument of Arjuna because he only says Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat. More than abhyasa, just mechanically doing, a little jnana is good. But more than jnana is meditation. Once having known the importance of japa, then you have to just meditate on that. Do the japa and then meditate. But even better than meditation is Karma phala tyaga. So after finishing your meditation, everything, you are asked to
It's like a shopping list example.
Hmm?
So if
shopping list. Yes. Yes. You
when
need the
have to
list till you
shop.
shop. Once you shop, you can throw it.
Mm.
Yes. Om Shanti Shanti.